What do you want?
I just wanted to let you know you're featuring in my YouTube video.
Oh, great. Can't wait to be showcased in a video that will probably get about 12 views. What an honor.
That was really harsh and hurt my feelings.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize your feelings were so delicate. Perhaps you should toughen up a bit before interacting with the real world.
Today, we are going to create a custom Alexa skill. We're going to integrate ChatGPT to it so that we can get some charming results like the ones you just saw. To get started, we're going to head over to the Amazon Alexa Developer Console. You want to sign in with the exact same account you used when you set these devices up initially. It just makes it easier when you want to do testing on the actual devices, otherwise it won't work if you're using a different account. Once you're logged in, you will see a screen like this. What we want to do is go ahead and create a skill. We're going to give it a name, so I'm going to give it a name of YouTube Demo, English as our location, hit next. Select a category that is most appropriate for the application that you're building. I'm just going to go with Other. Now for the model, we're going to go with Custom. It says Custom and that you're going to create it from scratch, but it actually gives you a Hello World example that you can build off of, which is super handy. So we're going to go with this one. We're also going to go with Alexa hosted Node.js. Quick note, the Alexa hosted Python, do not use that. It does not work correctly. I initially tried Python with this one over here. However, when you start building out your application and you want to use third-party libraries like the requests library or the OpenAI library to make API calls, it doesn't work. You can add them into this requests file, but it doesn't actually install the dependencies and it just fails. There are many other similar threads online about this exact issue, so it seems to be an ongoing thing which just has not been fixed. So avoid Python, use Node.js. For provision your own, I don't recommend doing that initially because there is a lack of documentation. When you do it, there's no clear link to your AWS account that I could see, and really I just couldn't work on it. So stick with this one for now. Select a hosting region. I'm going to go with North Virginia. Hit next. We're going to go start from scratch. Hit next again. And we're going to create skill. This will take a couple of minutes to execute, so I'll see you in a bit. Once that's finished building, you will see a screen like this. The first thing we want to do is head over to Invocations, click on Skill Invocation Name, and we have to change this name. Essentially, this is the phrase that you say or type out for Alexa to start your application. I'm going to call mine YouTube Demo, hit save, and then we want to click Build Skill. Go ahead and build the application. While we wait for that to build, I'll give you a quick rundown of how this all hangs together. When it comes to creating a custom Alexa skill, we have this concept of an invocation. Like I said, that is how do we actually invoke your custom application? That's the word spoken to actually start the app. Once you're in the app, there are what they call intents, and these are certain sections of your code that handle different things. Essentially, a custom skill is just a glorified if-then statement. And intents are basically if-then. So if a user says this particular phrase, send them to this particular type of code block. You'll see this very shortly in this Hello World example that I'm going to show you, where if you say hello, it'll route you through to the Hello World intent. However, if you say help, it will route you through a different section of code that takes care of helping the user out. And finally, you have a concept of utterance, and this is what did the user say, or what did they actually request? Imagine we had a note-taking app. We would say, start my note-taking app. I want to add a new note that would route you through to the correct section of code. And then the utterance would be the actual note that you want to add, which we can store as a variable and access within our code. Now, I had wanted to make an interactive chat so I could just talk for hours on end directly to an AI. However, custom Alexa skills are not set up that way. You have to go through this flow and you can only use what is in the utterance section. You can't use the entire conversation. It'll start to make more sense as we dive into it. Now that's finished building, we're going to have a look at our code and then we're going to run the application. we have our index.js file, which is our main codebase. We can see we have a bunch of different intent handlers. We have one for hello world, one for help, one for cancel, etc. So when our user says hello, they get routed to this particular code block. And when they say help, they get routed to this one instead. So what we're going to do is test the application. Now, in order to test it, we first have to hit deploy. Again, that's going to build. That's going to take a couple of minutes. It's quite frustrating, but every change you make, you have to wait for it to build again. We're going to then head over to the test tab, click on allow so it can use our microphone. I don't actually have one plugged in, so it doesn't matter. Then we're going to select this drop down, hit development, and we're going to type our command to start up our application, which is that invocation. So we say Alexa, YouTube demo, which is the name we gave. And this is what it comes back with. Welcome. You can say hello or help. So we're going to say help. That will route us to that help invocation. And now we're going to do hello, and that will go to that different section of code.
Hello world.
And we have our hello world example back. That's pretty cool. Now, what we're going to do is within our hello world invocation, we're going to, instead of just printing out hello world, we're going to take the user input, make an API call to ChatGPT, capture the response, and then have that read out aloud. So we'll head over back to code. The first thing we want to do is go to package.json, and we want to add the sync requests library. We're going to be using this library to make the API call. Now, when you look at OpenAI's official documentation, they have their own third-party library. However, that uses asynchronous tasks. In a Node.js application, asynchronous means it will make the API call, but it won't wait. So if you use their library, basically your code will execute the API call, but the Alexa commands will keep continuing, exit out before you even get your response. So we need to use synchronous. Essentially, this will block our application until we receive the response back, which for our use case, we need. We're going to go ahead, click save. Next, we're going to head over to index.js, and we're going to add this section of code, const request equals require, and essentially we're just initializing that library. Again, hit save. We then want to create a new file. We're going to call this config.js. And this is where we're going to put our API key that we use when making the OpenAI request. Whenever you make a request with OpenAI, you need to have your API key in the header section. So we're just going to set it here so we can call it as an environment variable. So we're going to create a constant. Make sure to use this exact naming convention because it's very particular. Put our API key in there, and we're going to export it. Again, hit save. And we're going to add this line to add the open API key from the config file that we just created. Now we can access that variable or constant within our code base. We're going to hit save and deploy. We haven't changed the fundamental logic of our code base, so it should still work. However, when I was building things out, I noticed that the error reporting wasn't very great. It was annoying to get into your build logs. And so doing frequent saves and frequent deployments just saves you a ton of headaches. So once you've done a small change, I then like to go over to the test tab, open it in a new tab so you don't have to keep switching back and forth, and just make sure your application still works. So we're going to say Alexa, YouTube demo, hello world. Cool. It's still good. Next, we are going to go ahead and set up our utterance. So we need to be able to capture what the user says to our application. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to head over to the Build tab. Click on Interaction Model, click on Intents, and we want to edit our Hello World intent because that's the section of code that we're going to use for this tutorial. These are all of the utterances, so what people can say to get into this particular section of code. What we want to do is set an intent slot to capture what they say. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new slot. I'm going to call it Catch All, and you have to click the plus button, and you have to select a slot type. Unfortunately, you can't do like a wildcard or a star to capture everything. So according to research online, Amazon.search query should capture majority of the use cases. we're then going to click into our catch-all intent slots. We're going to say that it is required to fulfill the intent. Now we have to add a speech prompt in here. So we're going to say, what do you want? This is what is our application going to say to the user. Hit the plus button. And then we want to capture their response in a variable. And we can do this by opening the curly brackets, selecting catch all, hitting the plus button, and then clicking save. Again, go ahead and build your skill. We should now be able to access that utterance variable within our codebase. We're going to head over to the code tab. Go within our Hello World intent handler code block, and this is where we want to start making changes. The first thing we want to do is create a constant which fetches the value that the user just said, and the way you do that is by using handler input, request envelope, request intent slots. Give it the name, so we called it catch all, and then dot value. Now this constant will have exactly what the user said. We'll then plug that into our API call. Another handy thing to do is to add a couple of log messages here and there, just to make troubleshooting and debugging a lot easier later down the road. Now we're going to go ahead and make that synchronous API call. We can do this by going make sync post request. And within here, we're going to add a try and catch statement. Here is the code that we want. So we're going to make a post request using that synchronous library to our ChatGPT chat completions endpoint. In the headers, we are saying application/JSON, and we are also sending through an authorization API key in our headers. This is the correct way that it wants it. So you have to do bearer with a space, and then you append that API access key that you have to the end of it. We then send through our body. So here we're calling GPT 3.5 Turbo, and the message that we're sending is we're telling the system to be really sassy and a tad mean in their replies. Now you can change this to whatever you want. You can be political, you can be funny, you can be really smart, caring, etc. I like being a bit more mischievous and a bit humorous. And then you're saying the user is sending through this content, which is what they spoke out. Normally when we use Postman, we just type it out. So like, what's the weather? But obviously this is dynamic and interactive with speech. So we can just use that value that we created earlier. Next, we want to add in a bit of error handling. So we're going to see if we got a 200 response from our API call. If we did, we're going to do a bunch of things. So we're going to grab the response body and just pass it through JSON. This then allows us to go through the JSON object because it'll be a huge JSON array with different values. And we can say, hey, give us the exact one we want. So with the output, there's a choices section, and within there, we want to grab the first bit of the array, which is our message, and we want to grab the content. It's just a fancy way of saying, within this entire JSON body, just give me exactly the small section that I care about. Now we're going to go back up to line 30 to change this to a variable, just to get rid of these error messages. Again, we're going to hit save and then deploy. Now, we've added that code in there, but we haven't actually called it to make the API call. However, we're still going to head over to that test tab, test our application out to make sure we haven't broken anything. That'll tell us if we have any obvious syntax errors or parsing errors.
Welcome.
Hello.
You can say hello. What do you want?
Cool. Now it's asking us what do we want. Remember when we set up that utterance within our intent, we set that message. So that is working correctly, which we want. I'm just going to say, what's the time? Now it won't actually give us a proper response, but that's okay. That's exactly what we expected. So now we're going to head back to our code, and we're going to go ahead and make that API call. So we're going to grab that function, pop it down here, brackets, and that will run it. Let's hit save and deploy, head back over to our test tab, and start our application.
Welcome. You can say hello or help.
Say hello to go into the hello intent.
What do you want?
And now we're going to say our message. What's the weather today?
Sorry, I had trouble doing what you asked. Please try again.
And that failed, which actually surprises me. I was expecting that to work. But that's a perfect segue into troubleshooting. We're going to head back over to our codebase and we're going to have a look at some of the logs. The way we do this is we hit this CloudWatch logs dropdown. Now we're going to select the default, which is US East North Virginia, where we deployed our Lambda application. You're going to see a bunch of errors like this. Don't worry about that. Just click one level above into log groups and you should see 3 different log groups. Now, what's really interesting is these are logs for every time you build your application. They're not actually the runtime logs that we want. It's doing a bunch of things related to the build, not my execution. Head back over to your console. For some reason, it is a real frustration of mine. You have to click on Oregon. For some reason, they're putting your logs in a completely different region just to confuse us and keep us on our toes. We can have a look at the timestamp. So this is the latest one. If we go into it, we will see logs for exactly what's happening. Now, I don't see any of my console logs here, which suggests to me that it hasn't even gone through to our hello world intent. I got it working. Essentially, in our code base, we had catch all set as lowercase. However, when I set up the intent, I had catch all with a capital C. So I went in and changed it to a lowercase. I actually did it through the JSON editor just because it's a lot easier. Essentially, this was a section here that was incorrect. It had a capital instead of a lowercase, so it wasn't able to link correctly. One last thing, I did change the invocation name while I was troubleshooting. It's no longer YouTube demo, it is Amazing Meatballs. I just needed something unique that I was guaranteed wouldn't be called from another script that I had. To show you that it's working, we're going to head back over to test. We're going to say open Amazing Meatballs because I changed the invocation name from YouTube demo to this.
Which intent do you want? Say hello.
Hello.
What do you want?
What's the meaning of life? It should now go to OpenAI and generate a somewhat funny response.
Honey, if I had the answer to that, do you really think I'd be wasting my time chatting with you?
It is working. Now I want to test it out using this device. If I say, Alexa, open Amazing Meatballs.
I'm not sure.
It has no idea. So now we're going to make it available for the device to use. In order for us to access our custom skill, the accounts have to match, which they do, but also the locale that you deployed into has to match. So at the moment, we're using US, but I'm based in Australia. So what we need to do is head over to Build, Language Settings, and we want to enable sync locals to make sure that your area is selected. Go ahead and hit save. The sync is not instant, so I recommend you go away for 20 minutes, half an hour, and come back. And even though I waited quite a long time, I had issues where I could actually pick it up, but it wasn't working correctly. I then had to go back into the build menu, select my Australian language, and build the project again. Fingers crossed, it should be working, so let's try it out. Alexa, open Amazing Meatballs.
Which intent do you want? Say hello to start.
Hello.
What do you want?
I want to know if you're working or not.
Oh, sweetie, of course I'm working. Unlike some people, I actually have a job to do.
And there we go. We have ChatGPT hooked into our Alexa device using a custom skill. I'm going to link all this code in the description down below, so just click on the link if you want to copy and paste some of it. As somebody who's gone down this road, I would caution people who are looking to build out custom skill sets using Alexa. The developer experience is being pretty piss poor. Just basic things like Python not being able to use external dependencies with the requirements text, missing documentation, constantly having to wait for builds, the logs being in the wrong availability zone. There's just a lot of these weird tiny issues that are going to trip you up and you are going to run into headaches. So just keep that in mind. I honestly hope Amazon just drops it completely and makes their devices open source. That would be the dream. So yeah, that was an interesting little project. If anyone knows of open source ways of doing this, or an alternative approach I should consider, please let me know in the comments down below. I would love to check something out that you could maybe perhaps have running on a Raspberry Pi as an example. I'm going to be doing a bit of research in the background as well. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.